Welcome back. In last week's installment we got all the major components of the grain elevator built, and we also got the base prepped so that we can install it. This week I'm going to deal with some of the many detail parts that go into making the structure complete. So follow along and I will walk you through what I've been up to.
My next task is to build some of these dust collection systems here. I already have a detail part from a kit to represent that. I've got these two cylindrical tanks to do. So I started off with some PVC pipe sections, but I can't glue any detail parts to them using styrene. So the first step is to put a styrene wrapper, and I'm going to do that out of this 5/1000 sheet because that will bend around nice and tightly. I'm going to super glue that on, let it set up, and then I'll be able to attach other styrene details. So I'm going to go away, do that, and I'll be right back.
Well, here's the head house that I built in the last installment. Since you last saw it, I've added a couple of roof vents. Here's the one part of the dust collection system. I have no idea what this cylinder actually does, but I followed it fairly closely. 3/4 inch PVC pipe with a 5/1000 styrene wrapper. I put that rib around it to break up the monotony, since it's visible in the photograph anyway. A plain styrene cap and a piece of square tube cut on an angle. I might install it around this side, I might put it on the front, or even around this side. I don't know yet. Here's the cyclone vent that I modified from a Walthers detail kit. It's supposed to go on the building this way with the rectangular outlet against the wall, but I needed it sideways, so I installed it 90 degrees from where it's supposed to be, which meant that the intake pipe was in the wrong orientation, so I had to cut that off and re-glue it. I've also added a frame to the bracket. It supports itself better that way because it's going to need to be painted before I attach it to the building. Goes about there. Here's the rest of it. Quite pleased with the way this turned out. It starts off with a cylinder from 1/2 inch PVC pipe with 4 styrene bands and a cap. On top of it you can see there's a whole lot of equipment that I followed fairly closely. I've got a maintenance platform. I was going to use diamond plate sheet, but since it's well above eye level it'd be impossible to see it anyway, so I just use plain styrene. I've got Tichy railings, a couple of Tichy brackets, and one that I just built from strip styrene because I only had 2 left. The ladder is from Central Valley. The base I worked on upside down, starting from here and going downwards. Square 10/1000 styrene. The cone is half of a 5/1000 styrene disc folded around and spliced at the back. The outlet pipe, piece of sprue. The frame built from various sizes of strip styrene. I didn't have any angle sections, so I made my own by combining 2 strips. The pipe here is a piece of sprue from a kit. The rings being slivers cut from a piece of styrene tube forced over it and glued. That goes against the building there and just fits it together like that. So this needs to remain detachable until after it's painted. It's also very fragile, so I don't want it attached to the structure until I have to. For the outside staircase that I've been talking about, I'm going to be using Central Valley steps and ladders. They do this rather nice open tread staircase, which I rather like, so I'm going to use a piece of that and a piece of the wooden handrail. The rest of it I'm just going to cobble together from styrene strip. So let's go ahead and do that, and I'll be right back. Okay, so the outside staircase has now been built. Here's the Central Valley parts that I showed you in the last clip. I started off with a concrete slab which I put at a slightly lower level than the rest of the foundation just for a little bit of interest. The deck is a piece of styrene sheet that I had already planked, left over from a previous project. The leg is a piece of 6x6 styrene. I was going to use 4x4, but I didn't have any. I built up the rest of it at a scale 2x8s, and yes, I did build, and yes, I did put in all the joists underneath it. The post actually goes through a hole in the deck instead of being two separate pieces. That way the handrails are a lot stronger. I'm thinking I might add onto the top of here and put a little porch roof over the door. I haven't decided on that yet, but if I do, it'll just be a case of another piece of 6x6 stacked on top of there, a piece of this same corrugated siding, a slightly lower level than this one, and then a frame out of 2x8s. Also, I have put the framing in these two openings from strip styrene. This door here is going to be closed, this one's going to be open with a truck backed up against it in the process of being loaded. I'm not going to bother with the interior lighting, mainly because I don't want to have to put a lot of interior details. I'm just going to paint it dark in there so that it's not too visible. Just suggest a few little bits and pieces. I need a bulk loading tube that will come out of the building somewhere in the vicinity of this window, go through an elbow, come down to just above where a truck will be parked in this first bay, and then there'll also be a pipe that would come out probably a little bit lower down and that goes through this roof, which is the one they use for loading sacks of grain. Also, I need a gutter and a downspout, but I'm not going to put that on until after I've painted it, because it will prevent me from painting the wall. The other details I need will go on the top here. When the head house is installed, there's going to be a safety railing around this deck here. The door that I built to go in here needs to install from the inside, so I've either got to leave this detachable until after painting, or I've got to cut a hole in here. If you recall, I do have space to get my arm up inside, so I think I'm going to go ahead with that. Of course, once I attach the head house, the structure will no longer fit on my workbench, so I want to leave that off as long as possible. Well, yesterday was pretty productive. As you can see, I've got the safety railing around the top. Final decision was to put this contraption over this side as it was originally planned. The final reason for that was that I found I didn't have enough of this railing to go all the way around the other side of the tower as well, so I had to stop it short just past the door. So anyway, the head house is permanently installed. I cut a hole for my hand so I can get the door in from the inside. As you can see, I'm no longer at my workbench. The moment I permanently installed the head house, it was too tall to fit under the layout, so I'm using the harbour section as a workbench. Also yesterday I did some work lower down. Remember I said I was thinking of putting a covered porch over the entry? Well, I've done that. I've also got my loading tubes in. I got this one, comes through the roof there. That will be the one that they use to load sacks. This one down there for bulk loading of trucks if necessary. I figured there would be a flexible tube on the bottom of there. I'll think about that. Probably after it's painted I'll experiment with that. I might just leave it off altogether and say, well, depending on the height of the truck that they're filling, they would have to have different length tubes that they would just attach and they'd store inside. Also, if we look around the other side, there is another bulk loading tube here. My reasoning behind this is thinking that this is a fairly tall elevator, so it will store multiple carloads of grain. Maybe this is one of several feed companies owned by the same people, and occasionally they would want to use this to store grain during an off season and then transfer it to another branch, in which case they might want to be able to refill a boxcar. Note that the tube is not over the middle of the track, it comes down the side. That's because this was built before covered hoppers were used for carrying grain. So there'd be another flexible pipe on the bottom, which they just put in through the side door of the boxcar. Anyway, I like the way this is looking now. Apart from the 2 pieces of gutter and some downpipes, and of course installing the windows, that's just about done. So I am going to go away and start painting it. I will check in with you again later.